Hey guys, Woods Farm here, just back out working on the Kubelwagen, part 59. So, last video we finished up all the body work. Now I'm moving on to some other things. I gotta look to the windshield frame and deal with that. I have a couple of different ideas how I'm gonna do that. There's some small little detail stuff that needs to happen. There needs to be mounting points for the convertible, the canopy top. I've got to decide on how I'm going to actually make the cap for the gas tank filler. I've got to get some materials and build the bumper bars. I've got some miscellaneous brackets for the tail lights and other things like that that need to get sorted out. But the other big thing that's going to start happening is I'm going to start prepping for paint. So that's going to be some sanding. I was just going to leave it as is, but my wife convinced me that I should probably do some sanding just to help with the finish. So right now everything's kind of just hit with either a wire wheel or an 80 grit flap disc, and just kind of some other sanding and some different points where the plug welds were. I knocked all that down, but there's a lot of really rough areas from that 80 grit. So I am going to do a little bit of sanding on the bigger panels, so the sides, the fenders, the top deck, the rear parts of the hood. I'm going to sand up just to hopefully get a better paint finish. I scored this at Canadian Tire the other day. It was on sale for half price, so obviously it's not going to be a high quality, but I think it was $45, regular $89, and I'm going to give it a try. And I picked up some sanding supplies. I'm going to start with the 150 and then work down to the 240. And I also seen this thing and picked it up. I thought it might help for some of the more irregular shapes and the nooks and crannies. So this is kind of like a Scotch Brite, so we'll see how that works. So for a lot of the sanding, I'm going to use this tool. Obviously I've got the angle grinders as well, but I recently picked this up at a yard sale for $5. It was barely used, and this is a random orbital, and this is what my wife recommended. I actually bought this for her for some of her projects. She does a lot of furniture. She's doing some resin wood stuff, so she needed one of these random orbitals to do finishing for her projects. And I started playing around with it, and it really leaves a really nice kind of finish. So I'll show you that once we get into this. Okay, that's a before, and like I said, I've hit some of that with 80 grit, so I'm going to go to 150 now. We'll see how that turns out. I don't know if the lighting's really going to show the result well on video, but we'll see. So I experimented with the 120 in the random orbital, and there were still a few scuff marks that were showing through. So I went to an 80 grit on the random orbital, and I'm just doing a quick once over with that. And then I'm going to start with the 120, 150, 220. But it doesn't show well in the video, but it's already making a pretty big difference. There's just this kind of light surface rust here or there. A lot of these panels have been bare metal for months. So it's taking that surface rust right off, and wherever I had hit it with the flap disc, the 80 grit flap disc, it's really buffing out a lot of those imperfections. So whether that's going to show through with the primer and the paint, I don't know. But it can't hurt to just spend an extra couple hours going over this, and hopefully it helps with the end result. That's a before on the hood. Okay, so I did a bit of sanding. I'm going to take a break from that. I'll probably do some more sanding later this afternoon. But right now I'm just going to play around with the windshield. So what I've decided I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make a temporary windshield with a plexiglass screen. So designing this is a little different than what I'm going to do for the actual windshield. It's not going to have a rubber gasket, and it's going to be kind of one solid piece. And what will happen is the windshield will kind of fit inside, and then there'll be pieces around the edge, kind of pieces of trim that'll get screwed into the frame to hold it in place. A little bit simpler of a design. I sourced some plexiglass out of the States. Still not cheap, but I can get a piece for around 80 bucks. And I've got all those scrap materials to do a quick windshield. So I'm going to do that just to get operational, and then later down the road I'm going to do a proper windshield so I can get it safetied and on the road. So these are the bolts for the windshield. You can see there's a step there. That should keep it from binding, and then this piece here, it's going to get a hole drilled through it and a slot. It actually gets 2 holes and a slot drilled in it, and that will create the mounting point for the rear view mirrors. Okay, so here's where I'm at with the windshield. Like I said earlier, this is a temporary windshield. It's going to have plexiglass. Eventually it'll be replaced with a better frame with actual tempered automotive safety glass. But for now, this is what I've come up with. I think I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board on the hinges and redo those maybe, because I measured this. I had a mock-up and everything cleared 16 inches high for the windshield, cleared the filler, and not thinking, I monkeyed around with the pivot point. I moved it a little bit forward just to get more clearance inside here for the bolt, and just that little bit of moving it forward, I probably moved it forward 1/4 of an inch, less than 1/2 an inch, and I wasn't thinking, but what happened is it changed the geometry, and now I don't have enough clearance. It's not quite enough clearance. So yeah, that kind of pisses me off. But I'm running out of time. I want to get this thing operational, so I'm going to go with this windshield frame. I mean, another option is to shorten it another 3/4, 1/2 an inch, but I don't want it. This windshield's already quite a bit smaller height-wise compared to a thing. I think proportionately it's good for a Kubelwagen, but I don't want to make it any smaller. I did sit in it, and you can see you got a good view. Even when the roof, canopy roof is on, you got a good amount of space to look through there, so I'm not too worried, but I guess I'm going to have to play around with this pivot point and maybe redesign these hinges so it changes exactly how things line up. I'm not sure. Okay, I still got some welding to do. Just letting it cool off. It was getting a little hot there. Obviously I went back and backtracked and dealt with this pivot point. So I've got the canopy set up, just looking at the mounting points for the canopy, so I can't actually pivot the windshield forward, but I sorted it out just by moving the pivot point back a little bit, and now it clears the fill nozzle, so the windshield works properly. I thought about leaving it, but it was just going to bug me, and I kind of want to be able to switch out the two windshields. So I'm going to make this one, and that's kind of the reason why I'm putting the money into it. This one is going to be plexiglass, and when I'm going to airsoft or blank fire stuff or driving off-road, I could throw this plexiglass one in. Not too hard to unbolt it and switch them out. So I wanted to make sure the hinges and all the mounting points were correct. That way when I build the proper street legal windshield, it's all going to line up, everything's going to work. So now I'm just laying out the position for these mounting points and playing around with some of the webbing straps and trying to get this sorted out. This actually, I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to make the attachment points here, but there'll be some sort of a pin and then a clip that will hold it in place. Okay, so some of the little details I want to get done before we paint. This little bracket here is for a support. There's one on each side, and it supports the framework for the back seat. So basically a 1-inch piece of tubing will slot down inside of that, and it'll support the front edge of the seat. Here's the fuel cap. I wanted to get this done so I could paint it, and it's pretty simple. Just opens up like that, and then there's a wing nut, and there's a rubber gasket here, keep water out, and it also helps snug that up when you tighten the wing nut. So I'm going to get back to sanding, try to get the sanding finished up. Okay, that's where I'm at. Started with the 80 grit, went to 120, and then took it down to 220. Looks a lot better. There's still a few little scuff marks here or there, but for the most part it's pretty smooth. So next step is I got to clean this thing up. I got to vacuum it out, get all the dust from the off of it from the inside, and start taping off parts. I'm also going to start stripping it down. So the doors are going to come off for the painting process. Obviously the windshield, the front fenders, they're going to come off, and eventually it's going to get moved in here, and it's going to get jacked up, put on jack stands. The tires are going to come off. So a lot of work to get it ready for the paint, which is happening hopefully this weekend. Got to pull the seats out. So a lot of work. Still have a couple of small little things that need to get done. I need to build a little steel cover plate that goes over that. And also on the front of the tunnel at the front, there's also an opening, a service opening. It needs a little cover plate made. Anyways, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. As always, like and subscribe. We're coming up on part 60, painting, and then it's going to be reassembling and getting the engine back in, getting the engine running, wiring, things like that, and hopefully in another couple of weeks I'll be able to drive this thing around. Anyways, thanks for watching.